little tape, they'll be just fine.
A little spit, a little bubble gum.
Hello and welcome to the Hackaday Podcast. I'm Elliot Williams.
And I'm Kristina Panos.
This is episode 328, Benchies, Beanies, and Back to the Future. This week in Hackaday news, the Hackaday One Hertz challenge is ticking on into its third week. We got 15 submissions so far. They are looking good. We need to do a good job of writing them up. Expect that in the next few weeks. Yeah, stay tuned. If you've got something that does anything once a second, let us know. Head on over to Hackaday.io, make a project, enter it into the contest, and you, yes you, stand a chance of winning a $150 DigiKey gift certificate.
What are you waiting for?
Exactly. Time waits for no man. When does it end? August 19th. All right.
Oh.
Oh, that's what they're waiting for.
Yeah.
They're like, I got a month and a bit. I'm cool. I'm just gonna keep waiting.
Plenty of time.
You always think that until the last minute, don't you?
Yes.
And speaking of the last minute, by the time you hear this, we will have wrapped up our call for proposals for Hackaday Supercon taking place November 1st in Pasadena, California this year. So we will fire up our spreadsheet, start looking the talks over, and narrow the slate down shortly. Which means I guess it's time to start looking for tickets to go on sale soon.
Ooh.
We'll have to do that in the next couple weeks too.
Gonna have to put it in the newsletter footer too.
I'll have to make sure we have heart for the newsletter footer.
Anyway.
And then without further ado, let's head on off to What's That Sound?
This is a journey into sound.
What's that sound?
What's that sound?
This week was, well, I won't spoil it for you. I'll let you listen to it first.
Okay. Here goes nothing.
A fellow scientist. Yes. This all looks nominal. I hope no one expects me to start up the generator. Smithers went down there and never came back. Don't you find this all rather fascinating? That's odd. Don't shoot! I'm with the science team!
Well.
Basically, you either recognize the video game or you don't.
Oh, I don't.
Oh, bummer.
Sorry.
No worries. Dan didn't either.
Okay.
What are the chances? But give me a good guess.
I mean, it seems kind of, more closer to Mario than, like, Portal.
Ooh, it's so much closer to Portal.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, so much.
Is it also in the orange box?
It might be.
And isn't Team Fortress 2, which I'm very familiar with?
It might be.
So that means that leaves Half-Life?
It might be.
Okay.
Yeah, good guess. That's right. You're a TF2 player, too.
Yeah.
That worked out in the end.
Yeah.
With a little prodding, you totally edged out Dan Maloney. I'm pretty happy about that.
Nice.
Half-Life's a great game. I was playing it again recently, which is how I got this character voice in my mind again. It's really funny. There's if you are one of the 12 people out there in the world who haven't played Half-Life, there are
I'm in that 12. I'm number 9. I mean 8. 8.
There's a secret underground science lab, Black Mesa, and they accidentally / maybe on purpose open a portal to an extra dimension. Aliens come in, start killing everybody. But there's a horrible conspiracy and cover up, and the scientists, some of them may be in on the game, some of them may not. Most of them get brutally murdered. so this is one of the scientist NPCs. Yeah, he has some great lines in it. What's fun is that I learned who the voice actor on this was. I learn a lot by listening to the answers. This is Dr. Kleiner, apparently, voiced by Harry S. Robbins, which I didn't know. 3 or 4 people said that, so I guess I believe it. I never thought I'd see a resonance cascade, let alone create one, etc., etc. So anyway, this one got a pretty good hit rate. 86 people responded, which is a lot of people.
Dang.
84 got it right. I'm fine with that. So here we go. What am I going to do? I'm going to fire up Python. I'm going to go math. Is it in math?
It's right where you left it. I don't know.
Import random? There's a random package. Okay, it's in random. Random.uniform. Let's go 184. Give it to me. 82.04, etc., etc. It apparently doesn't round it for you. Superb. Who's number 82? Scientist NPC from Half-Life 1. Congratulations to Alex. We will be getting in touch with you. Get your details. Get you a Hackaday Podcast t-shirt. Everyone else, listen in for next week when we'll come up with something that isn't a video game.
Wear it with pride.
Well, then let's head on to the hacks. This week, I wanted to start off with possibly the world's fastest Benchy printer. That is the Minuteman. The goal is to print a Benchy in a minute or less, which is absolutely ridiculous. I think
That's crazy.
that's crazy. On normal printers, you're looking at kind of 20 minutes. At the moment, Minuteman can put out a Benchy in 2 that looks really crappy and 3 minutes that actually looks really good. And that's kind of the story of this post, managing temperatures for ultra-fast Benchy printing. Spoiler alert, it's about managing temperature. So in this video, Jan Rutz, who is the guy behind Minuteman, takes you through the latest developments in this ongoing saga. If you haven't seen Minuteman before, it is an incredibly stable platform because it needs to be moving really quickly. The XY stage is just a puck that is just big enough to fit the bottom of the Benchy. It's on an air bearing and it's moved by 4 ultra fast stepper motors that kind of just sling this thing around. It's outrageously fast. And the reason that has to be so fast is because he has to get his layer times down and because he can't possibly move the hot end that fast because the hot end, to get the flow of plastic that he needs, actually has to merge filament from 4 different reels. And so he's got this gigantic mixing head thing that does some pre-melt there. And actually, they end up in a kind of a normal nozzle hot end at the end of that. But the point is that he has 4 motors feeding 4 different filaments in there because it just couldn't pump out enough filament. You know, the speed that the filament would have to travel through the print head was too fast. And so he had to split it into 4 different filament paths, which is kind of interesting. I mean, this printer, it really does the one thing. It really is aimed at printing the Benchy. And you might think, well, what the heck is the point of that? It's stupid. It's frivolous. Like, you know, you're printing only calibration objects. Why? And I think the answer here comes across that it's pushing the limits of hobbyist 3D printing to some weird maximum. And there's all sorts of stuff we can learn from that. It's kind of like, you know, Formula One cars. You don't drive a Formula One car. You don't need any of that performance. But if some of that tech kind of filters down into the car you drive, you're pretty stoked about it. Anyway, the tech here is varying temperature as the flow rate varies. And so because some parts of the print, the bed is traveling faster and some parts it's traveling slower, you need to vary, of course, the amount of extrusion going through there. And it turns out that for ultra high flow rates, you really want higher temperature in the nozzle. You want the stuff to melt a little bit better to flow that fast. And conversely, for lower flow rates, this is the first time I think I've ever seen anyone try to adjust the nozzle temperature to the flow rate. And to do it, he uses a post-processing script written by Salim Balail, and you can download this yourself. Matches your target nozzle temperature anyway to the volumetric flow going through there. What's funny is the nozzle can't change temperature that fast. It's a physical system. In particular, it can't cool down that fast. And so one of the other tricks, one of the kind of second degree tricks that go on in this version of Minuteman is that he's planning the speeds out so that they don't end up with super rapid volume changes so that he can keep the temperature of the nozzle changing in sync with it. And that's really interesting as well. He actually has this script that smooths out the amount of time it takes per layer to keep the amount of flow going through the nozzle roughly constant. You know, it has to change over time because some layers are small, some layers are big, but it helps to smooth this out, which helps the temperature control at the same time. And he actually has a slider on it where he can control how much it smooths the speeds out versus how much it goes maximum speed possible. And so you can kind of do a continuous quality versus time trade-off there too, which I thought was really interesting. These kind of techniques I can actually totally see being implemented on a slicer for a normal printer because, you are often worried about the speed versus quality trade-off. And if you are trying to print something at close to maximum speeds, the limit can easily enough be the hot end and how much it can extrude. So moving to higher temperatures for that helps, but then you don't want higher temperatures where it's slow and melty. So I think both of these are interesting bits of slicer tech. The teaser to Jan's video is these are going to be the slicer innovations of 2026. Yeah, I could see it actually. Sounds like a clickbait title, but actually I kind of buy it.
That's a good looking 2-minute Benchy.
Well, the 3 and the 4-minute ones are essentially indistinguishable from each other and look as good as anything I pull off my printer. Yeah, he's done some crazy things with trying to cool the print down as well, right? Because if you're moving that fast and pushing out that much filament, you also need to cool it extra fast. And I think at one point in this one, he's using air that's cooled by a dry ice pre-chiller. So it's like not just blowing air at the thing, it's blowing super cold air at it. He's played around in the past with water misting, like you do with a CNC mill or something. You can't just air cool it. You have to throw a liquid at it that has more mass and more heat transferability. He's played around with that in the past too. What insane good results for possibly the fastest Benchy in the world. I think other people are pushing the kind of 3-minute, 4-minute mark as well with other machines. We haven't covered it recently. It was a small volume, super fast 3D printer called the 100 that was aiming at 100,000 millimeters per second and is just a super printer. You should check that out if you're interested. Fully 3D printed. The guy working on that has his new printer. I think it's called the 250, and it's more than twice as fast.
I was wondering what the white ring is.
Oh, let me see. Oh, yeah, in that picture. Oh, it's the tube that feeds the cooler. It's just an air hose, it looks like. Oh, it's white because that still is taken during the dry ice run. That's actually ice condensing on the air line that feeds the cooling nozzle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I'm watching it. If you go to minute 39 in the video, it just it's black and it just starts to get condensation on it as you go through to minute 40, I guess. So as it prints the Benchy, it actually freezes the tube. That's how you know your project is crazy.
Y'all ready for this?
Indeed.
We think silly ideas, although this one's not silly per se, deserve to see the light too. Chris from Sound Workshop had this idea to make a woodwind instrument that plays like a synth with sliders and knobs and stuff. So inside that giant 3D printed case is a set of slide whistles, and the sliders on top couple to the whistles, and the knobs function as speed controllers for computer fans that feed air into the whistles. And they're always on, so this is essentially a drone instrument like a hurdy-gurdy or a set of bagpipes. But interestingly enough, Chris took inspiration not from those instruments, but from Indian instruments like the Shruti box and the Tanpura, which I need to look into because those sound interesting to me.
Oh, that is crazy.
It looks fun.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Unfortunately, the video is very short.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like he's also able to turn the individual flutes on and off by covering up some valves and stuff too. Maybe letting the air bypass rather, I guess. How cool. I love goofy physical musical instruments as well. There's something else. They sound realer.
Yeah. I want to make one of these.
You want to make every musical instrument.
Pretty much.
No shame there.
That's part of my screw you money dream, is having a room with a bunch. This is a big room of musical instruments and somebody to keep them all ready to go.
Totally changing gears. We're heading off to budget brilliance DHO 800 function generator. This is a hack by Matthias to add a function generator to a budget level Rigol oscilloscope. It's the DHO 800. Apparently, there's a more expensive model, the DHO 900, that has a function generator built in. And in the Rigol lineup, it's basically just a daughter board that plugs into a little header on the inside of the machine. What Matthias here did is just implemented that part of it himself and just made his own damn function generator. It's actually not a copy of the Rigol version. Instead, he engineered it from the ground up for price and ease of assembly and stuff like that. So it's entirely compatible with the scope, but it's not a clone of the one that would have gone with the scope. And that's pretty cool too. I like to see that, and we've seen a whole bunch of Rigol hacks in the past, and a lot of them were firmware hacks. I think the jury's still out about whether they left some of those open and hackable on purpose as a marketing gimmick, but they never really patched it. So I think a lot of those scopes, you can still expand their functionalities that were locked up in software just by software means. But this is not that. This is an entirely ground up function generator board that you can just plug in. Design's entirely open source, and you can find it on his GitHub. So if you're interested in making your own, head on over there. It looks like a mostly one-sided PCB design, which is pretty cool, except for the plugs on the backside that plug it into the scope. All in all, it seems like a great upgrade to a cheap scope, make it do something more interesting. I was looking to see if we'd actually seen any other physical hardware hacks on the Rigol scopes before, and of course we had. Back in 2024, we have a Rigol scope goes wireless, where Voltlog added Wi-Fi to the Rigol DHO 814 scope and doing some hacking on the software side to make the scope recognize it, and then boom, Wi-Fi powered oscilloscope for a quick, easy hack. And that's pretty cool too. That's basically made possible by the fact that the scope runs an Android OS on the inside. So getting the drivers for the Wi-Fi adapter weren't all that hard to do. So maybe that's a halfway software / hardware hack. This one is the first only hardware hack I've seen. This is you plug in the waveform generator into it. And I think that's pretty sweet.
It seems like that startup Chuck is always up to something interesting, but this time it has nothing to do with automating the production of food. Instead, Chuck is finding ways to get more realistic sounding cowbell out of his 3D printer. That's right, cowbell. Now the key to good cowbell sound is in a metal-like filament called PPS-CF. This is a carbon fiber reinforced polyphenylene sulfide, commonly shortened to PPS. This filament has both high temperature tolerance and high dimensional stability, so it's less likely to warp or deform, even in harsh environments. But, of course, the material comes with a few caveats, and that's mostly what the video is about, dealing with those caveats. Since it's carbon fiber, it requires a durable extruder nozzle, an extremely hot print head, and a heated bed. Chuck ended up modifying his print head to handle 500 degrees Celsius and the print bed to do 100 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, the printer bed demagnetized around 75 degrees Celsius, but he just added some binder clips to it. Spoiler alert. And in the end, Chuck had to do more than just upgrade his printer. This project required numerous calibrations and test prints to get that distinct metallic ring of the cowbell. If you have enough cowbell already in your life, there's plenty else you could use this filament for.
He goes at the end, he's like, well, if you can make a cowbell, maybe you can make a bell. And the answer is, not really. He tries to 3D print some bells as well, and they don't ring like a normal bell. If anything, they kind of also sound like a cowbell, which is pretty funny. But it does make you think that this must have different structural characteristics just from the way it sounds, right?
Yeah.
Worth all that effort? ? I don't know. We'll see what else he's doing with it. I wonder if he started out trying to print a cowbell, or if he started out trying to print a bell, and then decided that it sounded so much like a cowbell he would just roll with it.
I feel like he got eventually to cowbell.
Yeah.
I don't think he started at cowbell.
But dang, 500 degrees on the nozzle is no joke.
No touch, no touch. I have never heard of Chisanbop, but it sounds like K-pop for toddlers or something.
But now you're about to. My last hack this week is a marvelous video from Chris Stacker, who's a math professor at Fairfield University. We've seen a bunch of his videos before. He's been doing a series on interesting mechanical calculator devices, and they're super. This is by far his best and most interesting video yet. This is Kids versus Computers, Chisanbop Remembered. Chisanbop is a system for doing basically addition and subtraction with your fingers. So you kind of put your fingers down on the table to help you remember the numbers and manipulate the numbers as you go along. It's kind of like you're using your fingers as an abacus, basically. And the system is that thumbs are worth 5 and a finger down is worth 1. On your right hand, that's the ones digits, and on your left hand, it's the tens digits. So your left thumb is worth 50. You put your thumb and your pointy finger down, then that's 60, and et cetera, et cetera. The system is actually pretty simple. Like, you do addition by counting up, at least in its most rudimentary form, and you do subtraction by counting down. So you just kind of practice for a while going 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you put your thumb down 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? And so you get used to that feel, and it's it's like drumming your fingers. It ends up being a very obvious pattern. And so if somebody's like add 7 and 8, you can just put down 7 and then add 8 to it. But it gets interesting because a lot of the math will then involve shortcuts. Like, if you want to add 7, you're adding a 5 and a 2, or you're adding a 10 on one and taking away 3 on the other. And, there's a bunch of shortcuts that once you get used to it, you can use. But this is a math system aimed at kids, so you can always fall back on the simple counting method. This apparently rose to popularity in the late 70s and got shown on national TV, and there was a very short-lived company to produce books that would teach you how to use the system, etc. As a math system, I think it's kind of less powerful than an abacus, but on the other hand, you've always got your hands with you. And it was super good for teaching kids to do a lot of simple math. And indeed, part of its rise to popularity was that they had a demo where they had a bunch of basically 8-year-old kids who were on popular television shows of the time, ranging from the Phil Donahue show to the Today Show with Tom Brokaw, the Tonight Show even with Johnny Carson. And they showed 8-year-old kids out-mathing actual grown-ups armed with, at the time, cutting-edge pocket calculus. And so that was kind of the sales gimmick. But the interesting part of this video is the deep dive into the story of this whole thing and the people involved. And it's actually marvelously told by Chris here. The man who invented it is Korean, Hang-Yong Pai. His wife, Hija Park Pai, had moved to the States. She was an artist, calligraphy artist, moved to the States without him to try to make her career as a calligraphy artist, connected up with some people, ended up getting basically a patron, got her husband imported over as well. And this is, mid 70s. And so she's doing art, and his father was a mathematician and he's kind of a mathematician, and he invents this system for counting and doesn't have a job. So he goes to the local Korean school and starts teaching it to kids to help teach them his fun counting math system and teach them introductory math. A white American who actually had 2 Korean adopted children brings them to this Korean school. They're learning the Chisanbop system taught by Hang Young, and he's like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I'm going to promote this. And he was a TV script writer and was kind of well connected in the TV industry and fell in love with this math system and wanted to promote it. So Hang Young and Ed Lieberthal get together, form a company to promote Chisanbop, and then, it blows up. It's all over the place. They start producing instructional books and, basically a curriculum for kids. It gets an offer from a large publishing company that then falls apart. The two of them break up and they kind of go their own way, but both of them are still enchanted by the effect that this counting system has on kids. And although they broke their company up, both of them kind of keep chasing the Chisanbop dream. Hang Young, because he developed it, puts out a series of books where he like deepens it and shows how to do super complicated multiplications and things like that, while Ed Lieberthal starts making books that are like simpler and well illustrated and made for, you know, better teach grade school kids. And they kind of go two separate ways. In the end, the whole thing kind of fizzles out. Chisanbop doesn't become the next big thing, even though it had its year of time in the sun. But this is also the time of the new math in the American school curriculum, which was basically a failure. They were trying to teach math using all sorts of other funny methods. And this maybe kind of got some blowback from that. But the story Chris tells here is the story of kind of Korean immigration to the States, and it's tied up with adoption of Korean kids after the Korean War. And it comes out at the very end that Chris Stacker himself, the professor doing this research, his sister was also adopted from Korea at just exactly this time. And the whole thing gets reframed in this marvelous immigration/adoption story, and where both of them have adopted the math thing as well. It's absolutely poetic and marvelous. It's a really cool video. You know, A, if you like funny math systems, but B, it tells this really interesting slice of 1970s Korean American experience. And I think that's really cool too.
How have I never heard of this?
I have no idea. It seems like it was kind of a flash in the pan in the late 70s. Were you watching The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson when you were...
-1? No.
I missed it too. I think it was just before our times, and we missed it. Came and went without us seeing it.
For my last hack, I chose Pez Blaster shoots candy dangerously fast. Now, this comes, of course, from the Dangerous and Powerful file. This is the Pez Blaster that we didn't know we needed to see come to fruition. Yes, it shoots them hard enough to shatter them into pieces, and almost penetrate cardboard. As luck would have it, Pez is the ideal candy for shooting, since it's compact and hard, and already dispenses by a magazine. But getting it to come out of a pistol-like blaster is not much of a stretch then. Internally, this blaster is a flywheel setup. There's a pair of counter-rotating wheels that fire the candies out at high speed. These wheels are powered by a pair of small brushless motors, and these run off hobby speed controllers and lithium-ion batteries. All you do is pull the cool rack and pinion trigger mechanism to get the candies into the flywheels. And as you might imagine, the whole thing is 3D printed. It's amazingly engineered, so be sure to check out the video. It's a cool video. Let me tell you.
And little known fact, Davis DeWitt of the Backhaul Studios channel here actually gave a fantastic lightning talk at Supercon last year. I'll throw the link in the show notes for you if you want to see it. In that talk, he's discussing his condiment shooter, which is kind of a similar crazy cannon device, not exactly unrelated to this Pez one. That's a great talk. And in fact, I was trying to find this among the lightning talks. If you didn't see all of last year's Supercon lightning talks, now you have the video link. You should go back and check that out. There are other really superb talks in there that are absolutely worth their 7 minutes each. Oh yeah, and if you're coming to Supercon this year and you've got a lightning talk you'd like to give, start thinking it up. We'll be having lightning talks again. Look at that. I turned it into a promo for Supercon.
I dig it.
Always pitching that guy. Always pitching. Shillin' Hackaday. For my first quick hack, I wanted to cover Malcolm Wilson's IR point and shoot has a Raspberry Heart in a 35mm body. This is a sweet build. It takes apart an old camera, stuffs it with a Raspberry Pi 02 and a no IR Pi Camera 3. The sensor on digital cameras is sensitive to infrared, and so most cameras have a filter in front of it that filters out the IR. The no IR series of Pi cameras just simply doesn't have this infrared filter in there. So it exposes it to infrared. If you used to do infrared photography the old school film way, we used to do that by blocking out everything but the infrared and letting that expose the film. And it gives a particularly neat and eerie look. Malcolm mimics that here by not only using a digital camera that receives infrared, but also by adding that deep red opposite of infrared filter, the filter that filters out everything but the infrared. And he gets pictures out of this that look like the old school infrared effect. And I think they're absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's the way infrared photography should look. Nick W. Johnson et al. Turning PET plastic into paracetamol with this one bacterial trick. This is a science paper, but it is a crazy science paper. The idea that you could genetically engineer bacteria to turn PET soda pop bottles into the working ingredient in Tylenol is just crazy to me. But it also is so reminiscent of a piece that Dan Maloney wrote in his Big Chemistry series, where he was talking about the synthesis of the wintergreen artificial flavor and aspirin, both of which, of course, come from petroleum products. So none of this is impossible. Chemistry is really weird. In this case, they're just getting bacteria to do the weird chemistry for them. Hello.
Whoa.
And last up, 5-minute-ish beanie is the fastest we've seen yet, is a project from Kev R102. He's taken an off-the-shelf beanie cap knitting machine and added a motor and an Arduino to it and souped it up and cranked it up to 11. Of course, there's all the difficulties in doing weaving here. It has to make sure the tension's right, and it's going around and around and around, and the hooks are able to raise and lower fast enough. By the end of it, he's got it cranked up to 11, and it's turning out a wool hat in 5 minutes. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And Tyler, of course, throws in a link to the Minuteman project, which is making the fastest Benchies. This is making the fastest beanies.
For my first quick hack, I chose Dan Jovic's. Sis4 is a monkish clock inside a ceiling lamp. First off, a bit of a history lesson in case you're not familiar. The Cistercians were a group of hacker-type monks in the Middle Ages. They even had their own number system, which was far more efficient than Roman numerals, and even the Arabic numerals that we use today. For instance, a single glyph could indicate anything from 1 to 9,999. As for the clock itself, Dan Jovic reduced the glyphs to a 4x4 neopixel matrix, which makes things even more interesting. The matrix runs on an AT-Tiny 85 Digispark, and there's an RTC module to keep the time. There's even an LDR to detect the ambient light and adjust the neopixel's brightness accordingly. But the best part here is the enclosure. It's a cheap LED ceiling light. Dan Jovic reused the diffuser, the housing, and the mounting hardware, and added a 3D printed mask between the diffuser and LEDs, which doubles as a PCB holder. On the off chance that you aren't able to read Cistercian numerals, a simple flick of the switch changes it over to a scrolling digital clock, which is still a little bit hard to read on the 4x4, but it's not impossible. You'll see in the short video after the break.
Nice.
Next up, Ryan of Fat Lip Collective. 3D printer turbocharges a vintage vehicle. Now, this isn't the first 3D print that Ryan has used in his car mod projects. In fact, he's been on a straight-up streak. The most recent mission was to soup up the 1980s Toyota KE70 Corolla with a turbo engine. The main issue is, how do you fit the engine back into the chassis once there are extra parts involved? The answer is non-trivial and lies partially in the precise alignment of several pieces of Schedule 40 pipe that are needed to direct gases around. But armed with a 3D printer, Ryan was able to print a set of elbows and reducers that he would be likely to use. He even added degree markers for later reference and put flat sections at the end of each piece so they could be bolted together. With all of this at hand, it was easy to mock up various arrangements and reconfigure them as needed as he went along. This project is ongoing, so stay tuned. Lastly comes Lewis from DIY Machines. Shadow Clock shows the time on the wall. People use shadows to tell time for thousands of years, so why should 2025 be any different? Okay, it's a little different from, say, a sundial, but this clock is still capable of throwing shade in order to tell the time. The 3D printed design is based on one by Shira and has a hollow rim. 2 hands display the time and appear to be floating, but the minute hand is physically attached. The hour hand actually does float thanks to a secret magnet, which is attracted to a complementary magnet in the hour rotor. As the hour rotor turns, the hand points at the magnets. The whole shadow on the wall thing is a bonus. Lewis realized that by adding an LED light source, he could project the clock's shadows much larger on the wall. The electronics here are straightforward. An ESP8266 dev board turns the stepper motors and controls the addressable LEDs. It also pings a network time server to make sure the display is always accurate.
Well, that brings us to our Can't Miss articles. These are fantastic pieces written by our own marvelous Hackaday writing staff. This week I wanted to cover Maya Pasha's Dithering with Quantization to Smooth Things Over. And this is a lovely piece about how you do dithering. I guess I've always liked the kind of dithering aesthetic, and so I was really stoked to see a piece that covered it both from the kind of, I don't know, engineering side, but also from the simple, this is how dithering works as an algorithm explained side. And so it's a great piece for that. You know, imagine taking a picture, maybe it's a black and white picture, and you want to print it in just 2 colors. This was the problem that newspapers had back in the day, and they solved by doing halftoning, where they would just use an array of bigger or smaller black dots. And the bigger the black dots were, the more black ink density there was in a certain area, and the kind of darker that section looked, and vice versa. Fast forward to the modern times where we don't have variable size dots, we have pixels, and they're all the same dot. And if you want to look at like an old black and white computer, like the old Macintosh, for instance, which used to lean heavily on dithering, to represent a grayscale tone there is to basically just vary the density of black dots mixed in among the white ones. And how you do that, of course, are various dithering algorithms. The one that she covers in depth here, it's the Floyd-Steinberg dithering, which is a subset of error diffusion dithering in general. And basically the story is you have a pixel, it has, say, a numeric black-white value, maybe, you know, on a scale of 0 to 255, it's a 64. You have to choose whether you're going to represent that with a black or a white pixel. And so you represent it with a 0 because 64 is closer to 0 than 255, but then you've got an error there of 64. The different dithering schemes basically amount to how you're going to spread that error out into the neighboring pixels next door and below that one, so that on average you get a nice even looking density of dots in that space that convey the black level. Floyd and Steinberg's solution was to put 7/16 of the error into the next pixel, and then 3/16 into the one down and over to the left, 5/16 into the one straight down, and 1/16 into the one that was down and to the right. And so you just kind of march along the pixels and you say, okay, well, I had to quantize this one. The error I made from doing that was this much. You distribute that error into what would be the normally unquantized values of the neighboring pixels. And so, you know, if you made it black, you make the neighboring pixels effectively a little bit whiter, which increases their chance of being turned into a white pixel instead of a black pixel. That basically is it. There's a bunch of different cool dithering patterns out there. We actually picked one for the trailer image here, which is called JJN dithering. And in fact, I want you to go click over to the write-up by Tanner Helen that we linked to on this, which has examples of all sorts of different dithering schemes. And so if you're into it for the art of dithering, if you're into it for the aesthetic look, you owe it to yourself to check out how picking different numbers to spread the error out makes the image look different. I just love the way some of these, if you feed it like a basically gray gradient field, because it spreads the error out in this particular way, you do kind of get ripples of black pixel, white pixel, black pixel, white pixel, but it's not so regular, and you get very organic looking kind of sub patterns that I think are probably like optical illusions that come out of it, but really cool. Anyway, dithering's just a super cool aesthetic. Oh yeah, right. Dithering with audio, the same thing happens anytime you quantize anything. You can make anything you have to quantize sound better, look better, etc. I don't know. I just like the way dithered images look. So a little bit of art, question mark? And all in all, a nice article.
Well, for my can't miss article, I chose John Elliot V's Back to the Future, 40 years old, looks like the past. I think this is a really fun piece. It explores the cutting-edge technology of 1985 that turned out to be obsolete in the actual future of today. The future, if you will. If you'll recall, the movie begins basically with a bunch of clocks, but they're 99% analog. The only digital clock is a lovely split-flap number. And then we move on to the whole handheld video camera thing that Marty's doing sometimes. At the time, you had VHS and Betamax, or simply Beta as it turned out to be, although it was developed by Sony. And although handheld video cameras are still around today, they might be as grand as 8K, and I'm not talking about the cost, although there are probably some that are 8K in cost, and will definitely record to flash media instead of tape. But people still use tape for backup, don't they? Like data centers.
Yeah.
Last time I worked in that was a while ago, but we still used tape backup. Moving on, in the article, thrift stores won't even take the nicest cathode ray tube televisions of 1985. Ask me how I know. But these days, you're best off trying to find a retro gamer to buy it off of you anyway. It should be easy. I'm included in that lot, but I have a 13-inch, and I have two 13-inches, and one of them is clear, like it's from a prison. It's completely clear. But it has no inputs except an antenna input.
Right, of course.
And you have to use speakers with it, or a headset, or headphones. Anyway. John goes on to describe the competing video standards at the time, NTSC and PAL, and of course mentions the indignity of having to get up to change the channel, or adjust the volume. Perhaps the one piece of technology that's still around and going fairly strong is the vacuum tube amplifier that Marty plugs into to rock out, as well as the Variac controller that powers the amp. But back to the obsolete things like the cathode ray oscilloscopes. Analog meters are maybe half obsolete now, John says. The reel-to-reel is a real collector's item now, as most have moved on to vinyl at least. John then discusses telephones, which have changed a lot since 1985. Rotary pulse-dial phones gave way to dual-tone multi-frequency beep boops, an important one of which could be imitated with a plastic whistle from a cereal box, but that's a whole other article. His description of waiting for the dial to return to the start position from the dreaded 9 or even 0 on a rotary phone is spot on. Even the cordless telephone gave way to cell phones and voice over IP. And in closing, John mentions the Seaberg vinyl jukebox, something I personally grew up with and love to see out in public in 2025. I'll never forget this diner I used to go to in the 90s that had a remote control jukebox on almost every table and certainly in every booth. I sure used it a lot and would use it today.
Yeah, actually, John and I went back and forth on this when we were editing this about whether the vacuum tube amplifier was obsolete or not. And he had originally written this with like this whole like pro transistor amplifier piece.
Oh no.
And I'm like, dude, you're gonna make 1 million guitarists angry. Let's just step back and revisit this one, shall we? And he relented. He's like, okay, you're right. Ironically, the time of the transistor amp was like the mid-90s. And like, I think it's all back to tubes now. And when not tubes, emulated tubes. Digital fake tubes.
Foobs.
Back to the future indeed. That wraps it up for this week's Hackaday Podcast. Thanks very much for listening. If you see anything cool or do anything cool, send it to us at tips@hackaday.com. You'll find the links from every week's show fresh over at hackaday.com/podcast. And until next week,
keep on hacking. Well, they make all kinds of cute little steel-toed shoes these days. What's that sound?
This video's a bit long. If I get to be Mr. Bitchy about it. There you go. Took me long enough to figure out what I was saying. Well, for my first
Sis 4 is a monkish 3D printed turbocharged 3D could project yellow rectangle.
Boom.
Come on, hair.
Said fantastic twice.
Let's stop this train.